Welcome everyone to the Milwaukee Rental Housing Resource Center webinar. My name is Christy Luzar and I am the Executive Director at the Urban Economic Development Association. And we are excited to have you all join us for this exciting initiative. So for the logistics, we're using webinar. So everyone is muted upon entry because we have a large group of folks. And so please put your questions in the chat or the Q&A box and we will answer as many as we can at the end. We have Sarah and Olivia will kind of be monitoring those as they go, as well as Jessica. And so we'll make sure to have some time at the end for that. And yes, we will share the recording and the slides. So they will be posted on UWIDA's website, but for all those that registered, we will send a follow-up email after sometime this week with links so you can access the information that way. So your hosts, there's myself, I'm the Executive Director at Urban Economic Development Association, or UWIDA. And then we also have Sarah Greenberg, who is a consultant working with us. So UWIDA is a membership association of people and groups working in community and economic development. And we are supporting this project as a facilitator, providing project management, coordination for the co-partners. We manage bi-weekly calls and the follow-up activities, providing fiscal sponsorship as needed. And we brought on Sarah Greenberg earlier this year to help us because as all of the things I just described, you can tell it's a pretty tall task. So Sarah, if you want to tell a little bit about what you're doing.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Greenberg, and I'm so pleased to be supporting UWIDA and the Milwaukee Rental Housing Resource Center. My role in the project is helping to develop the infrastructure for the co-partner organizations to work together. I'm also supporting branding and promotion, including coordinating the development of the virtual center. And finally, I'm assisting with thought leadership and outreach to potential partners and supporters on the national level. So let's meet the co-partner organizations that make up the Rental Housing Resource Center. If the co-partner organizations could turn on your videos for a moment and get ready to unmute yourself, I'm going to call out each organization and we'll have one person from each organization introduce themselves and let us know who else is on the call from your organization. So we'll go in alphabetical order and we'll start with the Apartment Association of Southeastern Wisconsin.
Hi, I'm Tim Ballering from the Apartment Association. Also on the call is Heiner Giese from the association. We're a trade organization for rental property owners that began in 1974. And I've been on the board of directors for a little over 30 years.
Thank you, Tim. And the City of Milwaukee.
Hi, Mark Medrick from Milwaukee DNS. Unfortunately, Stephanie Samaripo was not able to be here today. Yeah, and I'm one of those people that gets phone calls that hopefully the Rental Housing Resource Center will relieve me of, the people in the middle and directing traffic, pointing people in the right direction.
Thanks, Mark. And community advocates?
Good afternoon. I'm Andy Elliott. I'm the CEO of Community Advocates, and also joining from our organization are Manuela Kirkendall, Deb Hefner, Shawana Lindenberg, and Kaisha Caldwell.
Thank you, Andy. Hope House?
Hi, I'm Wendy Weckler. I am the Executive Director of Hope House, and I think I am it here on this call.
Thank you, Wendy. Impact?
Hi, I'm Emily Kenny and I'm with Impact.
Thanks, Emily. Legal Action of Wisconsin?
Hi, I'm Rachel Fox Armstrong with Legal Action of Wisconsin. We do a lot of housing law issues related to evictions, habitability issues, public housing, things like that. And I'm scanning the participant list and seeing a couple of folks from Legal Action here. So that's great.
Thank you. And Legal Aid Society of Milwaukee.
Everybody, I'm Colleen Foley. I'm the Executive Director of the Legal Aid Society of Milwaukee. We are a 104-year-old public interest law firm that provides free civil legal services. Our civil division has a robust housing unit, and several of those attorneys are on the webinar, including Pete Knesny and Nick Tillman.
Thank you. And Mediate Wisconsin.
Hi, I'm Amy Colts. I'm the Executive Director of Mediate Wisconsin. You'll recognize us locally here as Mediate Milwaukee. We provide housing mediation services to help parties avoid preventable evictions or foreclosures. And also on the call today is Joanne Lipozovic, who is our Chief Mediator.
Thank you, Amy. And Milwaukee County.
Hi, Marisela Gawana with Milwaukee County Housing Division. On the call is also James Matthew with Milwaukee County Housing.
Thank you. So I just want to mention that if people would like to learn more about these organizations, you'll have a chance to do so over the next few weeks, and you'll hear more about that later in the presentation. So if I can just remind all the co-partners to turn off their videos again and mute yourself until you're presenting. And next, we're going to turn it over to Joe Pietrangelo from the Wisconsin Policy Forum, who will share some history of the Rental Housing Resource Center.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Sarah. I am Joe Pietrangelo with the Wisconsin Policy Forum, and I'm just going to briefly provide a bit of background for how we got to where we are today. So the publication of Matt Desmond's book, Evicted, was in 2016, was really the starting point. The book brought attention to the eviction issue nationally, but also specifically in Milwaukee, because Matt Desmond had lived here in Milwaukee and documented the lives of people struggling with evictions here. So in response to the book, the city of Milwaukee and Common Bond Communities partnered to form an eviction prevention task force with dozens of organizations represented that previously had little engagement with one another when it comes to evictions. And the city and Common Bond asked us at the Wisconsin Policy Forum to facilitate the group as they discussed eviction prevention, the needs and strategies to address and reduce evictions in the city. So after meeting with the task force for 6 months in 2018, we published a report that November called No Place Like Home that contained a set of recommendations that the group had reached consensus on. And those recommendations included a desire to create a new tenant and landlord resource center to serve as a front door for eviction prevention services in Milwaukee, to expand awareness of tenant landlord mediation services that already existed in the city but were underutilized, to increase access to legal services for tenants facing evictions, to enhance the capacity of temporary rental assistance programs, and to continue to convene the Eviction Prevention Task Force to work towards those goals. So then in 2019, UEDA took on the role of convening what is now known as the Eviction Prevention Coalition, and the group worked together to develop a model for a tenant landlord resource center that could respond to all of our report's recommendations. Then in 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic really accelerated those efforts. It was clear that the organizations that are now co-partners in the Rental Housing Resource Center needed to collaborate with one another to support all of the tenants and landlords that needed assistance, and also to utilize millions of dollars of rent assistance funds that were coming into the city as effectively as possible. And fortunately, the coalition had already started to create strong relationships that could be built upon. So that basically brings us up to this year and the pandemic. And our next speakers are LaToya Jones from Social Development Commission and Deb Hefner from Community Advocates, who will speak on the local response to the pandemic.
Good morning. I am Latoya Jones. I am the Business Services Manager here at SDC. Though I wear many hats right now, my primary focus is the rental assistance programs that SDC is currently operating. Back in June, the state had designated the Social Development Commission to oversee funds for Milwaukee, Ozaukee, and Washington counties. To date, we have distributed over 7.7 million to almost 4,000 individuals in need of assistance. The RAP program, which was the Wisconsin Rental Assistance Program, exhausted funds in the middle of September. The Milwaukee Rental Assistance Program started October 6th. Any takeaways that SDC has, it was a learning lesson because we realized that the need was greater than we were able to help with. I was able to advocate for the amounts. The Wisconsin program only allowed us to distribute $3,000 per household. With the Milwaukee funds, we are now allowed to grant up to $5,000. We were also able to change the per month amount, which initially it was only $1,000 for the Wisconsin program. Now with Milwaukee, we can allow up to $1,500. I also found it quite interesting because going in, I thought that the landlords would kind of be a problem with getting the funds out into the community. I found that it's quite the opposite. The landlords have been more than willing to work with us as an agency. The hiccup comes with the tenants actually completing the forms and returning them in a proper manner. I can tell you that we also have about almost 9,000 individuals that are just that we're waiting on to return their forms back to us so we can issue payment. So again, I'm thankful that the landlords are willing to work with us. We just need the tenants to do their part and return the forms to us so we can move them forward. I'm glad that we are able to partner with you all, the Rental Housing Resource Center. I also want to make note that we have crisis counselors that have been reaching out to everyone on our list. So in addition to the financial part of this, we are able to tap on those resources if someone is in need of food or mental health support. We are able to provide that on the back end as well. And Deb, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Latoya. So I'm Deb Hefner, the Housing Strategy Director at Community Advocates. So Community Advocates has been a part of the development of the Milwaukee Rental Housing Resource Center since its inception. As Joe said, the center no doubt accelerated very quickly in the wake of the COVID pandemic. And we have made some significant strides in working in coordination to serve tenants and landlords and in tracking eviction data. So in April, we helped to establish the Rent Help email and call center to help meet the anticipated demand for services after the state's original eviction moratorium ended. And since then, our team, which grew to about 50 quickly, has responded to over 20,000 calls and emails related to rent assistance and other general housing questions. And really the calls that we've received are both from landlords and tenants. 90% of our call volume, however, though, has been related to rent assistance. We are very grateful for the opportunity to have administered the Milwaukee County Eviction Prevention CARES dollars, which to date have helped prevent over 2,500 households perhaps possibly getting evicted. So Milwaukee County has no doubt been a great partner in helping us to meet the unprecedented demand that we were faced with. So we've been utilizing our HUD and private funds to provide support to those who do not meet the Milwaukee County Eviction Prevention Program criteria, which also helps to be able to meet the demand. So through our Rent Helpline and email, we've been able to also more broadly assess the needs of the client and make referrals to the Rental Housing Resource Center co-partners accordingly. So collectively, we started tracking this data. We know, between our inner referrals, we have helped to prevent over 150 evictions. Again, I mentioned the landlords. We've always prided ourselves in developing positive relationships with landlords, but I think the opening of the center and also COVID has just really enhanced this. we've been doing outreach through mailings and phone calls and presentations. The apartment association has been such a great partner. They've instructed their members to reach out for rent assistance information or check on application statuses directly with SDC or community advocates prior to filing or carrying out an eviction. And we've also made some good strides with property owner Barada. And so, I think all the co-partners met individually with Barada during the pandemic, and they've made some changes to their own policies in terms of reaching out to us as well to check on whether or not their tenants might be eligible for rent assistance for those are behind. And so next, more important than my voice, I'm really happy to be able to introduce to you Kaisha Caldwell. Kaisha is going to provide some perspective on how critical rent assistance can be to a household and to the need for a common clearinghouse for tenants and landlords to be able to access information and resources. So that said, I will turn it over to Kaisha. I believe she had a little bit of technical difficulty, but she should be joining us by phone today. Kaisha?
I'm sorry, can you guys hear me?
We can. Hi, Kaisha.
Hi, Deb. So my name is Kaisha Caldwell, and my first encounter with community advocates was actually back in August. But just to give a brief synopsis of what actually happened to me and my family, I actually lost my job back in April, and the only thing that I had available to me was my savings and my 401k. So I used up everything that I had, and then found out that I also tested positive for COVID-19 myself. So looking for employment and just some type of financial way to provide for my family was impossible. I couldn't look for a job because I had COVID-19, and with everything being closed, having an interview, what so have you, I couldn't do it. I got a couple of job offers, but nothing actually went through due to, not everyone not knowing what was going to go on with COVID-19. So fast forward to August, actually the end of August, I was just very desperate in need of help because I thought my children and I were going to actually, get evicted from our home because I had no other resources financially. So I sent out an email, I think it was late at nighttime, to community advocates, just to the general mailbox, and I just asked, hey, I have this experience. Do you guys have any type of offers whatsoever, just so that, my children and I aren't put out on the street? And I think almost immediately, Andy and Deb reached out to me, and since then, there's been no looking back. I currently work as a case manager for community advocates, and it just feels very great to be able to pay it forward to, other families and other tenants throughout the city of Milwaukee who need help, who've ran into some type of financial situation where, they can't pay their rent, they can't pay their utilities. And I think community advocates is doing a great job, as well as the other partners here in Milwaukee. And I just definitely think that it would be great to have that partnership for landlords and tenants to be able to get the resources that they need and are connected to people and other partners throughout Milwaukee so that they can, continue to provide for their families.
Thank you so much, Kaisha, for sharing your story. So thank you. So you can go ahead and turn off your camera and mute yourself, please. Thank you. Okay, so next up, we have Amy Kultz, who is the Executive Director at Mediate Wisconsin.
Thanks, Deb. Okay, so I'm explaining about the Rental Housing Resource Center model. The RHRC model provides a structure for co-partners to share information quickly discuss and come to consensus on how to respond to things like the federal and statewide moratoria that came about in the spring and summer this year, as well as the CDC moratorium this fall. The model is collaborative with an eye towards long-term sustainability in terms of addressing rental housing stability and preventing eviction. The model is intentional about bringing together resources for both tenants and landlords. This aspect helps makes the RHRC unique and groundbreaking. The RHRC has already resulted in direct benefits to co-partners and providing services more effectively. For example, in March, the co-partners quickly developed messaging around tips for landlords during COVID and tips to share with their tenants. In May, with support from MKE United, the RHRC sent postcards to 6,000 landlords containing these tips. Significant resources for COVID-related rental assistance have also been leveraged in 2020 through the Rental Housing Resource Center to better ensure co-partners have access to these funds for their clients. For example, through Mediate Milwaukee, we have realized the benefit of access to these rental assistance funds through the partnership. Our mediators help tenants and landlords navigate the application process, and access to these funds has really helped parties reach viable mediated solutions. We regularly receive referrals from small claims commissioners for this purpose, and we've experienced an increase in landlord initiated requests for mediation, in part due to these funds, but also due to the support from the Apartment Association in recognizing the value of our neutral mediation process as a tool for their landlords. And at this point, we're having landlords regularly refer cases to us prior to even filing an eviction. Also, as part of the RHRC model, co-partners are monitoring weekly evictions filed and making direct outreach to landlords and tenants regarding available resources. Likewise, the partnership has worked together to communicate with the courts. So, for example, the co-partners met with the circuit court judge and commissioners prior to the statewide moratorium ending to make them aware of resources that were available through all our partner organizations. And once the moratorium ended and eviction hearings started once again, the commissioners knew to ask tenants if they had applied or if they had lost income and would be applying for that rental assistance, and adjourn the hearings to allow time to reach a decision so the landlords could receive those funds and potentially retain that tenant. And Mediate Milwaukee worked to help parties put together stipulated mediation agreements to ultimately get cases dismissed. So through the partnership, there's been a greater sharing of information and resources amongst the co-partners and word in the community about these resources. Our next speaker is Emily Kenny from Impact.
Thanks, Amy. So as we have started through this partnership, one of the key things that we've learned is just how important this coordination really is. And so Impact runs the 211 social service helpline for Southeastern Wisconsin. And in the last quarter alone, we have made 4,000 referrals, just a little bit over 4,000 referrals to the Rental Housing Resource Center co-partners. And of these, the most used referral is access to financial resources. That is really an important piece of stabilizing renters and housing in our community. But then the coordination is really critical. So really being able to coordinate amongst each other, as Amy was saying, if you have the financial resource, but then you don't have the legal or mediation services to kind of help navigate through the next steps, that you might not be getting the whole picture as a tenant. So the coordination has really, that enhanced coordination has helped people get to the right resource. We've also learned how important the communication and collaboration with landlords is. One of the things early on in our early meetings putting this together that struck me, I mostly work in our coordinated entry program that helps people get into and through the homeless service delivery system. And one of the things that was said early on by our landlord partners was, we know when someone is struggling, but we're not quite sure how to help them. And so having that extra communication with landlords and between landlords has really helped stabilize tenant situations across the community. And also along with that, the education both for tenants and for landlords is an important piece that the Rental Housing Resource Center will provide. We already have enhanced our relationships and coordination, but a one-stop shop will really make this easier so that people can, both landlords and tenants can get the right resource by coming in or calling, and they can be directed to the right resource at the right time. Next up is Tim Bollering from the Apartment Association of Southeastern Wisconsin.
Good afternoon. So I have been a residential landlord since 1977 and on the board of directors of the Apartment Association for a bit over 30 years. And the reason I mention these long time frames is that in all the years I've been at this, I find it unprecedented to see tenant advocates and the housing organizations working together to the extent that we've seen through the Milwaukee Rental Housing Resource Center project. And I watch what goes on in other communities, and you do not see this in other communities. And I think Milwaukee has benefited greatly from this collaboration. The collaboration began years ago, first informally, and then in a more structured effort that became the Milwaukee Rental Housing Resource Center, which we're learning about today. And everyone benefits from these efforts. As others have mentioned, the COVID crisis in early March added an extreme urgency to completing these efforts. All the participants stepped up their game, and the organizations and their leadership worked diligently to find the resources necessary to prevent or at least reduce the severity of the rental housing crisis. My own company, we had 2 tenants towards the end of the Wisconsin moratorium that were 3 to 4 months behind in rent. And through the efforts of SDC, Community Advocates, and Mediate Milwaukee, we were able to turn that around, and they were able to stay in their homes. You know, it's really great to have a tool available other than eviction court. Because prior, when tenants were had problems, the only place landlords could turn was eviction court. So this is really valuable to both tenant and landlord. And for all the bad that COVID has brought upon us, there's been a silver lining of sorts in that the pandemic made us realize that we're all in this together. Kind of the catchphrase of the pandemic at the beginning, but truly we are. Renters and property owners are not opposites, but rather 2 sides of the same coin. You can't damage one side of the coin without harming the other. And we both need each other to succeed for our own well-being. And if tenants can't pay rent, properties will fail and fall into foreclosures. If owners fail, there'll be fewer future housing choices at higher cost for tomorrow's renters. And there's an impact on municipal budgets when owners can't pay their taxes, their employees, the sewer, water, fire insurance. We saw this all before in the aftermath of the 2008 housing crisis. Together, the participating groups jointly urged our elected officials to put more money into providing housing funding for those with the greatest need. But this project, it's more than just rental assistance. People that need are being offered case management to help with other issues. They're being given help with utilities, legal services, and mediation. A couple of the partner organizations, Hope House and Impact 211, continue to work tirelessly to reduce homelessness. It did not start here, but they are an important part of this. The Rental Housing Resource Center is offering a unique physical space that will provide services in a way that's designed to support public health. Pretty important for this pandemic and any future virus outbreaks. I think we all learned a lot during the formation of the Rental Resource Center. The mediation, case management, and referrals have gone a long ways to preventing evictions that might have otherwise occurred. We've heard some really strong numbers from some of the partners this afternoon. For example, through the association's work on the project, I learned that pre-filing eviction mediation was an option. I never knew that before. And as a result, my company has adopted an internal policy of referring all non-payment cases to mediation before any eviction filings. The mediation first policy works for us, and we will stay with it long after COVID is a bitter memory. Hopefully very soon, but not soon enough. And I'm aware of other owners and property managers that have adopted similar policies as well. And in fact, due to our work with the Rental Resource Center partners, our association has actively promoted pre-filing mediation to our membership. If I can make one ask of everyone today, that would be to reach out to all of your elected officials, from your alderman to the mayor, to state officials, to Congress and the Senate, the president. You never know who has the ear of a party or who will be in a position of power next. And ask them to continue to make meaningful housing funds available to prevent housing instability among the at-risk people and families in our community, and to allow programs like this to continue and flourish. With that said, it is my honor to pass the screen to Manuela Kirkendall of Community Advocates. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. So I'm here to talk briefly about the Rental Housing Resource Center, the physical space. I'm Manuela Kirkendall. I am the Chief Operating Officer here at Community Advocates. I've been doing this work for 20 years, and like a lot of you have echoed, this is the first time that I've seen such collaboration. I'd like to say that I know oftentimes to collaborate, we have to check our egos at the door, and I'm happy to see that a lot of us have done so. The physical space is going to be located at our downtown location, which is 728 North James Lavelle. It's going to be in the northwest corner of the building on the first floor. We found that this was going to be important in that when people come in, we don't want them to have to go through the normal process of waiting in lines and trying to figure out where to go. There'll be clearly identified signage so folks can go to their to that location. So we have a specific door for the Rental Housing Resource Center that will be clearly identifiable once individuals enter our building. The plan is to, the build out is actually happening right now. So if you guys want to stop by and take a look, you're more than welcome. The plan is to have the physical space open or available to be open as of early 2021. So hopefully construction will be completed by sometime in January. Like the other space in our building, we hope to have this space very trauma informed. The hope is that we balance the people's needs for assistance with their needs for privacy and dignity in a very stressful situation. And what that means for us is the space will be very inviting for individuals that are coming in. There's nothing worse than going through an eviction or potentially being homeless and coming into an environment where there's chaos. So the plan is to make sure that we have comfortable furniture, the spacing is adequate. And we talk about trauma-informed care. We talk about even the colors on the walls. And then also we were looking at the technology to make sure that the technology is simple so that individuals that want to use that are not stressed out in using that technology. I know oftentimes we have some technology that we tend to have for our customers, but it's very difficult to maneuver through. So we hope to have some very simple technology for those individuals. We talked about having office hours for our partner organization. So we definitely look forward to having you all in the space and sharing that space. And hopefully what that does is it prevents us from having to have individuals come to our location and then send them away to another location for additional services or other services if we can't assist them. So that's one of the things I'm very excited about, because oftentimes we do tend to send folks away when there isn't something that we can't do. And when you're in a stressful situation, oftentimes our clients will just go home and kind of wait for the other shoe to drop or the sheriff to come. So it'll be nice to have everyone in one location. We talk about soundproof Zoom rooms so that individuals can attend hearings virtually. So we plan to have those in place as well. The other thing, we were very fortunate last year sometime to get a grant from the Bader Foundation. And it was the intent of that grant was to beautify our lobby space, but also create a children's area. So we have a very nice children's area for the kids when they come in with their parents, so that the parents can take care of their business and keep an eye on their children, of course. But we have a nice space and some educational toys for those individuals, for those children that come into our office. So that'll be nice for them. One of the things we're really excited about also is this computer kiosk and printers available for people that want to complete applications online or print resources to take home. During the pandemic, what we've learned is that, just having, because right now we have that in our lobby, just having that available for individuals prevents a lot of back and forth. And then, just again, them having access to grab things they need off their computer, whether it's going online to get income information and things of that nature, having that system readily available for them will be a benefit to getting things processed a lot faster. We talked about, I think one of the things that we also talked about, there's a physical space, but there's also that virtual connection to Rental Housing Resource Center. And so we created a website, which is renthelpmke.org. It's set to launch December 1st with the full website available sometime in January. There'll also be a central hotline, and that phone number is going to be 414-895-RENT or 414-895-7368. And then also an email and that'll be info@renthelpmke.org. Both of those hope to be available December 1st. And it's going to be critical, again, that we provide this phone service. We also know that there are some people that either don't want to come to a physical space or aren't physically able to do so. And so we want to provide different means to getting the services that they need. And I think, again, as we mentioned, we're going to have individuals that speak several languages. So we'll have that service available for those individuals as well. And then we talk about the email address. I mean, it's important that we also accept the fact that a lot of our individuals that we serve are low income. They have those pay-as-you-go phones or have government phones where they don't have the minutes on their phone. So we just want to make sure we can use the email address if possible, if that works better for those individuals, so that they can conserve their cell phone minutes. Again, we're just really excited about the opportunity to partner with everyone. I personally seem like I've worked with almost everyone on the phone in some capacity over my 20 years in doing this work, but never in this collaborative manner. So I'm really excited about that. So next, I'd like to introduce Colleen Foley from Legal Aid Society of Milwaukee, who will talk about the long-term plans for the Rental Housing Resource Center. Thank you.
Begin, be bold, and venture to be wise. That is a quote by the Roman poet Horace. It speaks to the collaborative efforts of the Rental Housing Resource Center partners in launching this venture. The long-term plans that we are exploring together include the efficient coordination of services, staffing, and schedules under one roof for rental housing resource partners who've been working together for the last 2 years to advance common goals on behalf of the clients that we collectively serve. Maduela just spoke to the physical space, but ultimately the center will involve a centrally located physical site that is already a trusted, known location for housing resources through community advocates and the Legal Aid Society. There will also be, as noted, a central virtual repository, which will enable consumers to get information in just one virtual location versus searching multiple sites when someone is in an emergency situation and in crisis. It will include long-term a housing navigation forum, which will enable consumers to swiftly identify safe, affordable housing in the community. It will be a forum for tenants to vet landlords and landlords to vet tenants in a safe, reliable location. It will be a venue for donations, including furniture donations. We've already been fortunate enough to have a legal aid board member donate a very large, useful desk, for which we're grateful. So I encourage others to do the same and to work with the partner group in that regard. Ultimately, the Rental Housing Resource Center will be a shared space that will bridge differences and help us all work towards reduction of evictions in this county. It's more critical than ever that we work together in this venture for the long-term housing stability. I would just note that I'm really proud to be a member of this team, and I look forward to working with everyone else on these long-range plans. The Rental Housing Resource Center is unique, and it's a wonderful collaboration that will advance interests on behalf of a large group of people and for the better health of this community. So with that, I hand it off to Irma Yepes-Klassen with the Zilber Foundation about its support for the Rental Housing Resource Center.
Thanks, Colleen. Hi, everyone. I am Irma Yepes-Klassen, Program Officer with the Zilber Family Foundation. The Zilber Family Foundation is dedicated to enhancing the well-being of individuals, families, and neighborhoods by supporting nonprofit organizations to address basic needs and ensure personal safety, increase access to social and economic opportunity, and to improve the quality of life in neighborhoods. The Zilber Family Foundation is pleased to be among many funders supporting the efforts of the Milwaukee Rental Housing Resource Center. The foundation was an early supporter of this work, and I have been involved since the very beginning when I served as Housing Policy Director for Mayor Barrett. The foundation supports the Milwaukee Rental Housing Resource Center because we believe in the power of collaboration to address housing needs. We know that safe, affordable housing provides a foundation for individual, family, and neighborhood stability and prosperity, and leads to improvements in health and well-being. We're so pleased to see the progress that has been made to date and are impressed by how quickly the Milwaukee Rental Housing Resource Center partners engaged and built trust within the community, connecting tenants and landlords to timely resources, especially those adversely affected during this difficult time. We value the partnership and the tremendous work the partners do for the community, and we're looking forward to continuing to support the work of the center. And we hope that you will join us in supporting their effort. Thank you. Now I'd like to introduce you to Rachel Fox Armstrong from Legal Action of Wisconsin.
Thank you, Irma. I'm Rachel Fox Armstrong with Legal Action of Wisconsin. We are really excited to be part of this collaboration. I want to tell you about some of the exciting things we have leading up to the formal launch of the Rental Housing Resource Center, which is on January 1st. On December 1st, you might know it's Giving Tuesday. And so we're hosting a fundraiser to kind of piggyback off some of the online excitement that goes on that day. And we'll be releasing a video walkthrough of the Rental Housing Resource Center build out that's in progress right now. And we'll be starting on November 17th, releasing short video highlighting the work that each of the co-partners are doing through our social media channels each day. So that will lead up to Giving Tuesday. We're also pleased to announce that Wells Fargo has provided a $5,000 match for any contributions raised on December 1st, Giving Tuesday. So you can help us support these efforts and the launch of our Rental Housing Resource Center by following us on social media. We have links on the slide, and you can share and like our posts in the lead up to Giving Tuesday. The videos we'll be releasing, and you can use the hashtag RentHelpMKE, which is a callback to our website name. And you can also make a one-time donation during Giving Tuesday to help us get that full match, and provide long-term grants or sponsorships for programmatic and operating support. So we're excited to have you join us, and I'm going to turn it back over to Christy for a final Q&A.
All right. Well, thank you, Rachel, and thank you, everyone. I'm going to advance the slide. So I know this was a lot of information, but we really wanted to use this opportunity to kind of share not just who's involved, but kind of the things that we've been learning all along. I cannot reiterate enough, putting something together like this is already intense work, but the organizations that have been involved as co-partners are doing this during a time when the need for their services and the demand for their services increased exponentially. So it just says a lot about the commitment that everyone has demonstrated to do this. And so we're going to get to some of your questions, and just know that we are in the process of building this as we are responding. And so given how committed and collaborative everyone is, we've already gone through lots of different I would say pivot points and discussion points and things like that. And it's really something that we're hoping to keep doing as we move forward and launch the center and make it responsive to the needs of the community when it comes to rental housing. So I'm going to actually ask Olivia Loomis from Community Advocates, has been helpful in terms of monitoring the chat and question box. And so is Jessica. And so Olivia, I thought if you wanted to start with a couple questions and encourage folks to enter your other questions in the chat or question box, and we'll start with that.
Great. So one of the first questions we have pertains to the longevity of rental assistance. We're all focused on January 1st when protections and CARES fundings lapses. Is there any estimate of the number of households needing sustained rent support or are at risk of eviction after that date without any additional stimulus?
Well, I'm going to ask a couple of our co-partners to unmute, but I will just say, as I responded in the chat, like this has been top of mind. We have biweekly calls, and everyone sort of feels like the end of the year is really going to be a real pivot point again, with a lot of rent assistance funds actually reaching their expiration date. So I'm going to ask maybe Latoya and Deb to unmute themselves, and maybe some folks from Legal Aid or Legal Action and Mediate Milwaukee, because these are conversations they're having now with tenants and landlords. And if they want to respond to just sort of give their viewpoint. I will say there are some HUD CARES Act funds that have a longer timeline. So there are rent assistance funds that are available. It just won't be nearly at the scale. And partners have been working really hard to rate some private funding sources, knowing that we're all waiting for Congress to act with more rent relief. So if anybody, the other co-partners would like to join and answer that question.
Hi, this is Latoya. I can honestly say that it scares me. On our forms that we currently provide our customers, it indicates we were actually asking if they needed help for January, because when we first started the Milwaukee program, we were under the impression that we could go ahead and pay January if the funds were allocated prior to December 31st. That found not to be true. And I can tell you about 90% of our applicants are worried. And we say that because the forms that we get back in our conversations, okay, you're going to help me now, but what am I supposed to do, come January? And right now we don't have an answer.
Yep.
And I would just add to, so we are also asking our tenants if there's a need for subsequent case management, and so Milwaukee County is also contracting with the Hope House that's being able to provide that service, and that's been very helpful. And then in addition to that, some additional fundraising as well that we've been a part of.
Looking to see if there's anyone else who would like to answer. This is a moving target, I'll just add. And so again, I think Tim made a really eloquent plea for us to contact our elected officials and really demonstrate how important it is that they really act with more rent relief. We just won't have the scale of resources available. But one thing we can do is, because we are working together collaboratively, is we'll work together to sort of look at who are those folks that really have said that they need rent assistance again in January. And so we can come up with a number, and maybe that makes the advocacy that much more stronger. But at the end of the day, we can still work with folks to see what we can do. And I will I personally have heard so many stories on these calls of everyone from every agency. They just work tremendously hard to help folks find a solution, whatever resources are available. And so that's what we're hoping the center can do. It can help connect someone to not just one place, but many places and see what all the options are. So we have any other questions, Olivia?
Yeah, there's a question here that is about advocacy for tenants who may have disabilities, and if we have any specific goals that focus on working with tenants that have a disability.
I will say at this point, we haven't articulated specific goals around working specifically with tenants with disabilities, other than to the point that I feel like we've tried to think about how the virtual center and the physical center will be accessible to all. So that's always but I do know from another hat I wear at UWIDA that the challenges in particular for people with disabilities in our community and housing cost burden. So just having a higher housing cost burden in general are really critical. And so that brings up a great point. I think that's something that we should be thinking about. And then I guess I'll open it up to any of the other co-partners if they, this might be something too that I think might come up with some of our legal services partners, because a lot of times it could be around facilities and units that maybe aren't accessible and kind of accessing those types of things. So I'm going to look and see. Is anyone who would like to speak to that?
I'll jump in.
Thanks, Colleen.
Christy. Yeah, I think this is a good time to better collaborate with Disability Rights Wisconsin as well. So we could certainly collectively do so and get them involved in the center in some capacity. They would be the logical group to spearhead it and to lead that sort of effort.
Mm-hmm. I will add to that, you know, there is this other component to the center that we didn't really get into, but it is the Eviction Prevention Coalition, which will now be a larger, the Housing Stability Coalition. But the idea is that that's the place where we can engage groups like Disability Rights Wisconsin and other homeless service providers and food pantry networks, all the places where people might be going for some sort of assistance where housing comes up as a challenge for them or an issue that they are working through. And so that's where it's sort of that behind, this is the public part of the Rental Housing Resource Center, but there is this other side behind it of the folks that work in these spaces and sort of those who are on the front lines. And then there's a whole network of stakeholders and organizations that work with different kinds of people, different groups of people, neighborhood groups. And that's the goal. The long-term goal is to have stronger connections there too. So Olivia, I don't know if we have, I guess if there's anybody else who would want to speak to what we're talking about. Otherwise, we can go to the next question.
Great. So something that's come up is how are property owners that are chronic eviction court attendees available to participate? You mentioned Barada properties, Deb. Could someone maybe speak to how Barada has been cooperative to these efforts?
Okay. Yes, I'm actually going to ask both Deb and LaToya may also have some insight to this, as well as Colleen at Legal Aid. Barada in particular has been actually a group that we've been working with, and also Amy or Joanne from Mediate Milwaukee. That is where a lot of, I think, critical and mass has been achieved. Tim Ballering spoke a bit about this, but just the kind of outreach we've been trying to do with specifically different groups of landlords, those that we know we see are using eviction court regularly. And the idea is if we could engage them and think about a preventative strategy first, that could go a long way. And so I don't know if any of those folks I just called out would like to speak to maybe some specific experiences they've been having with that.
Yeah.
I can speak on behalf of Amy and I at Mediate Milwaukee to say that we're aware that Barada is working closely with community advocates to work with their tenants to get the housing assistance currently available through the funding. So that's happening very actively. And then we have also met with them because they are, like Tim spoke of, looking at kind of a paradigm shift in how they deal with the eviction process. And they would like to use it as truly a last resort. And that has not historically been necessarily the case. And so I think there's a real commitment by a couple of the larger landlords and the community to deal with this differently. So that's really great news.
Deb or Latoya, or if anybody else would want to add anything?
Yeah, I would just say too that, I mean, so our volume is obviously unprecedented. But so that what that also means is that we've been able to speak to that many more landlords and tenants. I think it just speaks to the outreach and just the increased communication and finding common ground. And that's really what happened with Barada. I feel like it was just a matter of us getting around the table and just figuring out how to streamline the process on their end. And so that they could put those other supports in place prior to having to file an eviction, and just learning from them too that you know, it's a huge cost to have to file for eviction. So like they're also looking for information on what they can do themselves. So you know, I'm hopeful that there'll be more Baradas. Obviously, the apartment association members are already on board with this, but you know, I think just the continued outreach and communication will be key.
Okay. Colleen, did you want to say anything?
Just briefly, I would echo the other comments where Barada management has worked in good faith to reevaluate its late, you know, imposition of late fees, and we have a regular coordination with them for they will consider tenants who have multiple evictions on their records, whereas some other landlords just flat out CCAP someone and won't consider someone for a rental. So there has been a major shift in the dialogue, and that's been a good faith ongoing communication that's welcome and hopefully will be replicated with other landlords as well.
Okay. And then I did see Amy from Mediate on, I don't know if she wanted to add anything before we move on.
I really don't have anything additional other than just echoing others indicating just the willingness to keep eviction as a last resort by Barada and some other larger landlords and property managers. So really a shift in the thinking and recognizing that through these co-partners, there are resources that can help address issues outside of the court process in a more productive way and less costly way.
Right, and I'll just add, in the chat, you know, I saw other property owners listed, and frankly, you've given us a nice to-do list to kind of replicate some of the initial successes we've been having. And that's where the Apartment Association has been a really great partner as well for us to really just get out to their members, what they've been doing and their participation in the center and some of the success that they've found. So Olivia, if you want to go to the next question.
So we have two questions about affordable housing. The first is, does the RHRC do any advocacy work around affordable housing development? And the second is about the HUD household income limits, the eligibility requirements. Have these been updated to reflect real time, and how do we make sure that affordable housing is a priority?
Okay. I will take a stab at this, and if there are any groups, other than co-partners, want to chime in, please turn on your screen. But I will say that yes, advocacy is something that we do talk about in the context of the Rental Housing Resource Center. That's part of that longer term sustainable vision, if you will. We recognize with the group of stakeholders we have at the table working on different parts of rental housing, that also means that we could work together on policy issues. So that is a long-term goal. I would say right now it's been more shorter term, really focused on the kinds of like, so for example, when CARES Act was passed, making sure that the state's allocation, some of those funds did go to rental housing needs. As far as the HUD income guidelines, the HUD updates those usually once a year. Actually, Emily, Kenny, you might be able to answer that question, but that is something too that I feel like, you know, we kind of have to wait for their cue as to if they're going to be changing that anytime soon because of the impacts of COVID-19. So I don't know if anybody else wants to. I think Colleen, I'll just talked a little bit about one of the things we've realized is that, you know, inevitably somebody comes in the door for this sort of shorter term assistance, if you will, but it leads to these longer term conversations with clients about, well, can you afford to stay in this place? Is this a right fit, you know, given what your situation is? And so that's where we realize that the center itself and the structure that we're building here over the long term could really become a place to foster those connections to a more affordable housing for folks. So I don't know if there's anyone else that wants to add in.
See, this is Joanne. The only added comment I'd make on affordable housing is not unlike Tim's comment about contacting your legislators to talk about funding during these really extraordinary times. The idea of affordable housing is one of those bigger policy issues that we talk about, and that requires people to get engaged and to contact their legislators to say, this is something we value and we need you to work on. So that's also part of the community-wide advocacy that we all have to get involved in.
Right. So Olivia, I know there's lots of questions in the Q&A bubble too, so I guess we'll kind of keep going through. We were ahead of schedule, which is good because there are a lot of questions.
Oh, we have a question about kind of differentiating the forms of rent assistance that there are. What is the primary difference in the services offered by community advocates and the SDC for rent relief?
I'll just say that I'm going to have like Deb and Latoya speak about maybe the, if they want to ask a kind of more specific, the different sources that they have and how they work with people. Latoya talked a lot about the flexibility they have with the MRAP program versus the state funds. But one of the goals with the center is that there are lots of different sources and different groups have them. And this is why it's hard for people to navigate. And so the idea is that people could contact one place and we would work on the back end to make sure they're connected to the right place. So right now, there are differences between the services offered by these different co-partners. But for current rent relief, it's like people should be able to call like Impact, they can call SDC, and they can call community advocates and know that we're all working together. You know, Deb and Latoya didn't talk about this, but they're developing a shared database essentially of the rent assistance, because knowing that they're both getting inquiries and it's sort of like, well, let's see if we can find the best fit. And so some of these HUD funding sources have more specific eligibility criteria. And again, people shouldn't have to know that to be able to access the resources. And so the idea is that you call this number, you go to this website, you come in this space, and we have people and things there that can help you connect to more than one thing. I think Manuela spoke really well about that. Let's not just send somebody all these different places. Let's work with somebody and find them the best resources for what they're dealing with right now and what we can do with them in the future. So I don't know if Deb and Latoya, if you guys want to talk a little bit about just the kind of different rent assistance funding sources. I don't know if we have to go into a huge amount of detail, but more just so people know that there's kind of a range of that. And we have a lot now, but it won't look that way in a few months even probably.
Yeah. Sure. So I know one difference, if I want to point out, is for the Social Development Commission, we only deal with the city of Milwaukee. So that's a little different than the RAP program that we had. We were able to do the entire Milwaukee County. So with partnering with community advocates, if someone is on our list that lives outside of the city, we make that direct referral to them so they can get assistance.
And I would just add, so like Latoya said, so we obviously can serve the whole county with our Milwaukee County eviction prevention dollars. And we've really been prioritizing those since those have the 12/31 ending date. And there was obviously so much more of them. And then we have our traditional HUD dollars as well that have a little bit more stringent guidelines. And then we also have some private dollars too that have a lot of flexibility. So again, we've been prioritizing the COVID dollars, but really just looking at the through our application process, we're really looking at the applicant as a whole and trying to just determine what the best fit is for them.
Yeah, I will just add too, Amy talked a little bit about this, but one of the earliest kinds of collaborative things that happened with the rent assistance, a lot of this is time-based. So when do the funds have to be spent? Let's spend those first. But also to recognize that people might be calling legal aid or mediate or legal action too. But honestly, the best chance of getting their case resolved is to have some rent assistance to pay rent arrearages. So they signed an MOU to work together. So those agencies actually have the same common application and then are working with community advocates and STC on the back end to get that application through. So, you know, knowing that there's a lot of doors where people can go through. And again, some of these HUD funding sources, you know, why we have impact in the county and Hope House at the table is a lot of this is related to homeless prevention. Those sources are a little bit more, I would say, complicated and defined. And so we really need those partners at the table to help people navigate those sources. So before I move on, I don't know if anyone else wanted to add. But the goal with the center is to create one place for people and know that we're all working together. Okay, next question.
Is there a plan in place for tenants who have been evicted already and need help getting the eviction off their record or the record sealed?
I am going to pass that on to, I think we have Raphael from Legal Action on the call. If he, or I think Colleen from Legal Aid or Amy or Joanne from Mediate, because they actually, each of those work actively with folks, I think, on that. So I'm looking to see, oh, and there's Heiner too, I think.
Hi, this is Raphael from Legal Action. Yeah, if someone is looking for help clearing a judgment of eviction against them, they have a few options. I think one of the first things they should know is that sealing a case is really only going to be available as an option if the case was dismissed. If it hasn't been dismissed, it's almost going to be impossible for them to get the case sealed. But if it is something they want to have sealed, they can try contacting Legal Action of Wisconsin if they've already filed the paperwork to have a hearing. If they haven't filed the paperwork to get a hearing yet, what they can do is work with the Marquette Volunteer Legal Clinic or the Milwaukee Justice Center. Both of those organizations are working with clients to help them put together the motion that would get them in front of a judge to have a hearing. And then once they have a date in place, they can reach out to Legal Action of Wisconsin and the Eviction Defense Project to see if we can provide an attorney to help them at that actual hearing.
Yeah, hi, this is Heiner Giese here from the Apartment Association. I think one thing to keep in mind is that we are definitely in favor of, if at all possible and is justified, certainly let an eviction record be sealed. It definitely does adversely affect people, and you don't want that for the future. What I'm afraid of going forward, I'm thinking now past January, when a lot of these cases that have been deferred are going to be coming up for a hearing, is that landlords are going to be looking at those cases where the tenants had some ability to pay, but simply filed the declaration and made no effort at all to make some payments. I've tracked those cases on the court commissioner level. I've watched some of them in front of Judge Connolly. And so again, if tenants would cooperate, an example would be someone who's on unemployment comp. Clearly they can't pay the full rent because their income has been substantially cut back, but certainly they could pay something that would help the landlord cover the landlord's water bill and real estate taxes. And there is a certain subset, I'll say a small number of the thousands of people who have been helped, but there's a small subset of these tenants who just simply say, great, I've been able to file this declaration and now I don't have to pay rent until at least January. And I think, landlords are going to want to look at those cases, unfortunately, and say, well, that's not the kind of tenant that I would want to rent to. So that's something to think about.
Yes, and I know that one of the conversations that we've been having too is, how the resources can be used to help people who are going to have rent arrears, and really encouraging folks that even if they are struggling to work and reach out for rent assistance during the moratorium, not waiting until everything ends. So I know Amy also, I think you had something to sort of speak to on this as well.
Sure, just in terms of the conversation on sealing cases, when cases are mediated and that court case is dismissed, once the terms of that mediated or stipulated agreement are reached, then the case is dismissed and the parties could make that motion to have the case sealed. To be clear, through mediation, we can help with that dismissal part, but we're not able to help with the process to get sealed, that's when we collaborate with Legal Action and Milwaukee Justice Center. But a really good point is the fact that, as we're discussing, having the eviction on someone's record really becomes a challenge when someone is trying to find elsewhere to live. And sometimes we get a mediated agreement that involves a move out, but that case can't be sealed until after they move out. So again, it speaks to the benefit of trying to resolve cases prior to that eviction filed and avoiding that situation. Just one other point on this topic, I know that the in-house counsel for Barada Properties is working on a somewhat expedited or automatic process that will allow cases to be sealed once there is a stipulated agreement in place. So we've seen movement on their part as well to try to help facilitate, getting those cases sealed when it is appropriate.
Yeah, this question brings up a great sort of point around process and how there's lots of different processes, for people to wade through. And so one of the goals, I think, with the centers that you have the courts involved, you have the county, you have legal services, you have housing advocates, you have the apartment association, because these are where things get bogged down. Like, so I got my rent assistance, but now I have this thing on my record, right? And so the idea is that because we are working collaboratively together, we can think about some of the things that might make that easier. So for those of you that did read the report from 2018, a good example is there was a recommendation there about looking at having a housing court. That has been somewhat, I think, backburnered because of what's happening now, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't be thinking about how legal processes are working for people and if there are things that we can improve in. So those are the kinds of conversations that co-partners have been having. And I do want to just mention, in case people weren't monitoring the chat, Deb did share a really great link to the Community Advocates Healthy Housing Initiative and the report that they did. That was actually a project that was going on simultaneously with this initial eviction prevention work. And it is a great policy book for affordable housing issues and the things that we could do around that to make increase access to affordable housing, safety of housing, the resources needed for that. It's a great place to start. So I know we have a lot more questions. So Olivia.
Can I add something about sealing? This is Joanne, really briefly.
Sure.
So one of the misapprehensions that Amy and I see when we're dealing with court-connected cases, particularly with smaller landlords, is that there is a belief that when a case is potentially dismissed through like a mediated agreement, that it gets automatically booted off of CCAP, and that's not true. So sometimes we have worked in an agreement between the parties to agree to seal the case once everything is done. So for court-connected cases, sometimes that is helpful to talk about that with the parties. And it also, to Amy's point, advocates for starting it earlier, because that is not indeed how it works. And so if people don't want that to be hanging over a tenant's head, then starting a pre-filing is a much better way to go.
Right. That's a really important part. That's one of the goals with this project, is really to increase access to eviction prevention strategies, truly. So mediation is a great tool for that, where you can have these conversations, not just about what do we do to solve the problem now, but what are some of the things we need to think about or talk through for the more longer term solution. Okay, Olivia.
Yeah, so rent assistance is clearly a bulk of what the RHRC offers to tenants and landlords. Two questions pertaining to that. The first, can tenants apply for rent assistance directly on their own, or do they have to be referred by Impact, for example? And then the second is, how can we check the status of an application for rent assistance, as often it takes multiple days or weeks for the application to get through the review process?
Okay. Deb, I'll start with you.
Yeah. So you can check the status directly with our team through our rent helpline, which of course, I think it was mentioned, Manuela mentioned, it's going to be shifting to a new email, but we have our current number, which is the 414-270-4646, and email renthelp@communityadvocates.net. I'll put those into the chat. So those are the ways that you can be able to check the status. And what was the first question? I missed the.
Can tenants apply directly on their own, or do they have to be referred?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, no referral is needed. For us, really, what we're looking at is just that there was a loss of income, and so tenants can apply directly online or can come in and get their own application.
Right. Yeah. And then if they're, start, let's say, with one of the other co-partners, the idea is that rent assistance always comes up, so that if the application goes through that route, that's okay too. But people can just go directly to Community Advocates website. We'll put that in there for now. But the idea eventually is to make the Rental Housing Resource Center the gateway, and then you connect with the folks on the back end. And LaToya, I don't know if you wanted to add anything. I know that SDC has an application on their website and a phone number that people can call to.
Absolutely. The website is the best form of contact for us. We also have inquiry for landlords if they are specifically asking for updates. And I have a team manager that is responsible for connecting with the landlords. And then if it's the actual customer, we have one too. I can get that information over to you, Christy, and you can delegate it as you see fit.
Great, thank you. Olivia?
Yeah, we will ask one final question. This is from a CBO in the community who's asking if there's anything that CBOs can do to partner with this effort.
Yes, yes, and yes. So this year, because we've been so focused on forming the center itself, which is kind of, I've been talking about as this intervention services, if you will. But the goal is to bring back that larger stakeholders group that we've called, there's an advisory group that's a little bit bigger, and then there's this broader coalition. So if there's any community-based organization that is interested in being a part of that network, they can reach out to me directly if they'd like at UWIDA. I'll put my information and we'll have it on the slides too. And we'll make sure to get you in that network. The goal is to have that group meet quarterly or 3 times a year as a larger group. But then as we think through, and that's really just to communicate information and connect with each other on these issues. But if you have ideas around specific ways you can support this or be connected, we'd love to hear that. I think SDC in particular is a great example of that. Like they were asked as a community action agency to step up and help with rent assistance with the state. But, that's not something that they do normally. They have built a huge amount of capacity, but they also have this great network of wraparound services. And so it's led to conversations around, yes, we can help somebody get rent assistance and address their immediate housing solution, but what do we do to make sure that when they get that done, they go to that kiosk down at James Lovell Drive and they figure all of that part out, what happens next? That's where the partners and the community-based organizations are super critical, not just from referring on the front end, but for how do we work with them and people to make sure that it just doesn't end with that one thing. I mean, that's the Housing First model, that's wraparound services, but you need everybody at the table working together. So please reach out. Just know we're building our cars, we're trying to drive it. I use that metaphor a lot for a lot of the work we do at UWIDA, but it's super critical to know who wants to be a part of this and think about ways that we can have you engage with the work. It is truly collaborative, and it's not just about the people you heard from today, it's about a lot of the other organizations that work with people in this community. So I think that was the last question, if
There are.
I was going to say, I have just a couple that I think would be helpful to address really quickly. This is Jessica from UWIDA. First, there are a couple organizations on that serve particularly the homeless population. So I'm wondering if maybe while we close out, if some of the co-partners could just drop in the chat for everybody what in-person services you're offering and how individuals could find that if website and like phone isn't the best option. So if you guys could just drop some of that in the chat. And then Christy, I'm wondering if you could quickly just reiterate who are the co-partners. There's a lot of people on the panel. And then after that, if you could just share an update as to like the website, when that might, when people might expect that to be up.
Okay, I'm gonna go up. Hopefully you guys can see all the slides going. So I have the co-partner slide up. So these are the 9 entities that are, well, including UITA, that are really focused on this intervention services model. So we have the Apartment Association of Southeastern Wisconsin, the City of Milwaukee Department of Neighborhood Services, particularly their work with landlord and tenant training, community advocates, Hope House, Impact, Legal Action of Wisconsin, Legal Aid Society of Milwaukee, Mediate Milwaukee, and Milwaukee County Housing Division. And so the website, we will have a preview page up in the next week in time for Giving Tuesday, because we're going to be directing folks, and I'll have a little bit of just background information about the Rental Housing Resource Center. But the goal is to have a more robust website up by January. And some of the things that we were talking about in particular with that is, there will be information on tenant responsibilities and rights, and information for landlords and connection to things. It's not going to replicate or do things that are already out in the community, but the idea is it becomes a gateway to connect people, resources they can trust. So, in some ways this becomes just really the front door, if you will, for lots of resources that are already here in the community, but are often hard to know where to go first and where to start. And so hopefully was that right? I think I had both questions there.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I think.
Hey, Christy, this is Ron Hagwood from the Apartment Owners Association.
Yes.
I just wanted to take the opportunity to share, if anybody has anything that they would like us to reach out to our members with that would be beneficial to tenants as well as landlords, please give us a call, or they can go through you, Christy, and we would be more than happy to create a Zoom meeting and put them on our website, or set up a meeting for them to reach out to as many landlords as possible.
Great. I think that was, I'm going to hand it over to Sarah now to close this out. And that was a great way for us to kind of wrap things up, I guess, if you will, just to know that the agencies and the organizations here that are involved really are interested in thinking about how we can do this more effectively and better, and make sure that people get the assistance they need, and what's the best way to get that out. So feel free to share that in Q&A and chat, how you'd like to stay connected, and we will work on that. So Sarah, I'm going to hand it over to you now.
Thank you, Christy. I want to remind all the participants that we will be emailing out the slides and the recording, as well as posting them on the UITA website. We will also review any questions that we missed and try to address those when we send out that email as well. Christy, you want to advance to the last slide?
Yes. I'm sure there's an easier way to do this. But that requires more technology more technology knowledge than I have at my fingertips. Yeah.
On this last slide, you'll see the future web address, telephone helpline, and email address for the Rental Housing Resource Center. These resources will be available starting December 1st. When we send out the slides, we'll be sure to include information on where people can go now for assistance. Thank you all for joining us today to learn more about this very exciting collaboration. I want to thank the Milwaukee Rental Housing Resource Center co-partners for all of their hard work to put this collaboration together. It's truly a privilege to work with such a dedicated and impactful group of organizations. I also want to thank today's presenters, and finally, thank you to all the funders that have already provided support for the RHRC. I just wanted to add that I have the benefit of working across the country, and this is the most exciting collaboration that I've seen around rental housing and eviction prevention. And I'm not just saying that because I'm working on the project. If you have any questions after the presentation, Christy's email and my email are on slide 3, so feel free to reach out. And don't forget to watch our social media for the co-partner videos and the Giving Tuesday fundraiser campaign on December 1st. And with that, I think we will close out. I want to thank you all for participating and have a great afternoon. Christy?
Thank you.